You may now begin your presentation.
Thank you. I'm Kapahi, the founder of Mandel Diagnostics. Our diagnostic device detects the most common cause of vision loss so early, optometrists can treat patients before they know anything is wrong. During my PhD, I worked with a patient who discovered he had age-related macular degeneration while he was driving. He said he noticed something off in his vision, and when he closed his left eye, the car in front of him disappeared. 1 in 5 people over 60 will develop AMD, and the disease destroys the center part of your vision, making it impossible to read and eventually impossible to recognize faces. I heard the story of one patient who could no longer recognize the faces of her kids and grandkids, and she said, "I can't wait to die because I can't live like this anymore." And for every 3 patients with early AMD, 2 of them don't get detected in a standard eye exam. For decades, though, this didn't matter. The only treatment was retinal injections, applied at the late stage and, at best, stopping progression. Fortunately, in 2024, new treatments were approved that are non-invasive. They save the payer $8,000 per year, and they work at the early stage. These would be perfect, except now clinicians have no way to detect and track the disease at that early stage. Clinics that are using these new treatments rely on subjective questionnaires to show patients that it's actually working. The result? Only 30% of patients who are offered treatment actually uptake by their clinicians. And for every patient that starts but doesn't notice a change immediately, half of them drop off after that initial loading dose. Using quantum information technology from my PhD at the University of Waterloo, I developed a device that detects early AMD in 1 to 2 minutes per eye. This is a Class 1 medical device, which means I expect to have Health Canada and FDA approval by this summer. Unlike most medical devices, I don't require additional clinical trials to actually get regulatory approval. That de-risks the most difficult part of getting a medtech device through into commercialization. The device creates invisible patterns in a beam of light. These interact with your eye to create patterns in your vision, like the image on the left. But patients with early AMD lose their ability to see the middle of this pattern. So what we do is make this rotate, and patients are asked, is it going clockwise or counterclockwise? Everybody sees it at first, but when we block out everything except the middle, only healthy patients can identify the rotation direction. It's interesting technology, but that doesn't mean that anyone's going to pay me for it. So near the end of my PhD, I joined the Velocity Incubator, and the coaches there challenged me to prove that this market opportunity was real. So I started cold calling and cold emailing optometrists and ophthalmologists throughout Canada and the US. To date, I've contacted 397 doctors, had 83 in-depth interviews, particularly with those who have early AMD treatment devices. 30 of those clinics asked me to pilot my device unprompted. But more interesting, the experts told me I should be able to use this same marker for AMD to detect a range of other diseases, like diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, and even Alzheimer's disease. So we designed the device such that we can incorporate those new testing modes through software updates alone. So the plan is sell these devices at $15,000 up front with an $8,000 annual software subscription. That enables you to get these new testing modes as they're unlocked. Across Canada, the US, and Europe, that's a $1.2 billion market opportunity with over $600 million in annual recurring revenue. For clinics with treatment devices, they can get an extra $60,000 per year just by capturing more of the patients who are currently saying no to treatment. This would be true if clinics didn't charge extra for diagnostic tests, but that's not how they work. Most of them charge extra for advanced diagnostics. Charging $20 per test and focusing on patients over 60, clinics can generate an additional $72,000 from direct testing revenue. To reach $1 million in annual recurring revenue, we need to get to 125 clinics. Our beachhead are the 400 clinics across the US and Canada that have already adopted those early treatment devices. So I went back to the clinics who were most interested in piloting, and I said, will you pay me a $10,000 deposit to pilot my device? In January, our first clinic said yes, a key opinion leader in optometry who also said, I'm going to promote this device on my podcast and at upcoming conference appearances. To date, all 10 of our pilot devices have already been signed for and are shipping out at the end of this month. That traction was enough to get the interest of some of the largest manufacturers in the space. Vision MedTech in particular has been extremely active for acquisitions in the last 2 years. All of this was made possible by over $100,000 in grants and pitch contest winnings, won in secret during my PhD, because once I won my first pitch contest, my supervisor asked me to sign away the rights to all the IP I generated while working at the lab. If I wanted to keep using lab resources, I'd have to lose all ability to say how it would be commercialized. I refused, and for the last 2 years, I've worked nights and weekends outside the lab to develop the device you see here today. At this point, thank you. But at this point, I was still working solo. It was just me. I developed the device, I did the preclinical testing, I wrote a couple patents during my PhD that were then acquired by the co-founders of BlackBerry. But what I really needed was extra hands, a clone of me, and more time to get these devices built and out into clinics as soon as possible. In December, I was catching up with a colleague who worked with me developing these clinical devices in the lab for over 4 years. He was waiting to hear back if he got a full ride scholarship to one of the top technical universities in Europe. 3 weeks ago, he got back to me and said, I won my scholarship, but I'm going to say no, and I decided to join you instead. Together, thank you. Together, we have a team of advisors who are optometrists, ophthalmologists, and medtech founders who collectively have raised over $100 million for their own ventures. Dr. Mayo, in particular, was critical in the deployment of the early treatment device deployed in the US 2 years ago. He loved what we were doing so much that on our first phone call, he said, yeah, I want a device. I want to come on as an advisor. And he wrote us our first investment check. That was 2 weeks ago, so we decided to open up our pre-seed round. We're going to use this money to deploy more units faster and to start the process of getting our device approved for at-home use. Today, 80% of our round is allocated, and we expect to close within 2 weeks. And the reason there's so much interest around this is that we're not just building one device to detect one disease. We're building a platform to let clinicians detect disease risk by reading the retina. And to make that accessible worldwide, we're committing that a $10,000 prize today will be used to build 2 devices to be deployed in rural India and remote First Nations communities across Canada. Today, our device allows optometrists to detect the most common cause of vision loss in 2 minutes per eye, so that they can treat patients and keep their vision healthy. But tomorrow, the hardware in our device, coupled with software updates, will allow clinicians to predict disease risk by reading the retina. Thank you.
We will now begin the question and answer period. Judges, please raise your hand to indicate you have a question, and a microphone will be brought to you. When asking your question, please stand if you are able.
Hello, Connor. Great presentation, thank you. Can you tell us the steps that you've taken to protect your intellectual property?
Yeah. Early on, once it became clear I wasn't going to do this as part of the university, I talked to the commercialization office, Watco at the University of Waterloo. I told them the situation, what I wanted to do, and throughout the process, they were quite clear. Buy your own equipment, do it at home. We'll keep track of the fact that you're doing that, and it has nothing to do with the university. Waterloo is the only university that I know of with a completely inventor-owned IP policy. So I'm able to use that to do this completely separate from my research. And so I filed provisional patents when I finished my PhD in October that cover the technology itself and the methods we're using for this early detection.
Are the annual subscriptions required even if no other uses are desired or going to be used?
Yeah, for optometrists who are just interested in doing the AMD detection, we're offering them a pathway to buy the device outright. It won't get those updates in the future. If they want to pay us software subscriptions later to get those extra features, that's included. But for most of these detection methods, it requires combining multiple pieces of data and doing analysis on that on external servers, which is why there's a need beyond just the fact that we're doing research to have that software subscription if you want to go beyond macular degeneration.
Thanks for the presentation, Connor. Question about manufacturing.
Yep.
How are you managing possible manufacturing bottlenecks? Can you talk about your strategy there to ensure you
Yeah,
get
for
your
sure.
product?
Yeah, for the last few months, we've been engaged with a contract manufacturer around Toronto to take over the device once it reaches a state where we can't scale properly. The first devices, we have an ISO certified facility at the Velocity Incubator that we're using to build those first pilot devices. And the plan is to build them by hand probably until we reach about 40 units per year. That's when it becomes too much time for us to deal with it ourselves, too much of a distraction from the research for new components. And that's when we're going to hand it off to the contract manufacturer. They're engaged with us as advisors to make sure that we don't do anything today that makes it impossible to build it at scale tomorrow.
Is this on? Okay. A clarification question. You mentioned 400 clinics have adopted early treatment. Is
That's
that what
right.
you said?
Yes.
Would you expand beyond that group, or what is the market beyond that?
Yeah, so they're really the beachhead of, like, they have an immediate need for the AMD screening right now. There's about 100 clinics a year that are buying those devices as well. They've only been out for a year and a half. So that is growing as our beachhead. But to expand outside of that, there's a couple avenues. If we go further down the cognitive decline route, I know family physicians around Waterloo who are very interested in including that. Right now, it's about a 3-year wait to see a geriatric specialist if you're based in Waterloo. And so screening tests that can better select who should be in line for those specialists is really needed on the family practice. And then on the optometry and ophthalmology side, the big fish is looking at getting this device incorporated in something like Sunglass Hut as basically an automated test that requires very little clinical expertise to operate and can be used for everybody who just comes in wanting sunglasses or blue light filtering glasses.
Sorry. Hi, congratulations. In terms of competitors in your research, have you found competitors? And I would love if you could tell us one thing that they are doing better than you.
Yeah, so the best competitor we have, or I think the competitor I'm most worried about, is dark adaptation. Basically, how long does it take for your night vision to kick in? That works for early AMD. The problem is to measure that in a person who's showing an impaired ability to do dark adaptation takes 20 minutes per eye. So you can't put it in a standard eye exam. The other most similar device to ours is also trying to use polarized light perception, which is what we're doing. They've been trying to do that for about 15 years. They're a group of optometrists, and the problem is the pattern their device generates is about 2 degrees. So if you hold out your hand, it's the size of your thumbnail. It's so small that the false positives make it impossible to use even on 20-year-olds. The pattern we're able to generate is more like the size of your hand with your fingers outstretched. I think the thing they all missed is that in physics, there's a couple of things we can do to create these really complicated polarization structures and get those on the retina. It was a technical gap that could have been closed 20, 30 years ago, but no one from my field knew that they needed it in optometry.
Just a quick question so I better understand this. I think you talked about at-home use.
Yeah.
I wanted to understand the business case for that, because since it takes 2 minutes, it's extremely expensive. I just want to, if you could elaborate, please.
Absolutely. So there's really 2 areas. When you're at the later stage of AMD, the injections that stop you going seriously blind that I mentioned are when you convert to wet AMD. Basically when the bleeding is no longer under the layer of the retina, but it comes out. They monitor patients very closely because the sooner that happens, if you start treatment immediately, the treatment results are way better. Like days and hours matter. So there are patients who have continuous monitoring devices at home for that purpose. The second one is there's 2 new drugs going through phase 3 clinical trials, should be FDA approved 2028, that are single shot therapies for this disease. That's going to require some monitoring at home after the treatment. So I'm not imagining patients would buy this. I'm imagining you go get your retinal injection. It's a single shot gene therapy. You need to be monitored for 2 years. You lease one of these from your ophthalmologist.
Hi, 2 questions. Very impressive.
Thank you.
One, what are the other patents you?
Yeah, the 2 other patents that I wrote had to do with, really my PhD is actually in precision measurements with neutron interferometry, so they're related to that field. I am here because of a happy accident that somebody said, oh, you know, people see patterns in polarized light. You should shine that laser into someone's eye. And then I did, and now I'm here. So those patents were for completely different technology, not covering what we're doing here.
Okay, and then second question, I don't know much about AMD. How do they compare with floaters? Is that?
AMD is the degradation of the nerves on the back of your eye that carry the signal from the photoreceptors to your brain. So it's like the wires breaking between the camera and your brain itself. Floaters are more like junk tissue, scar tissue that floats around in the liquid of your retina and doesn't really go away.
What gave you the guts or the confidence to pursue this without the support of your university?
I don't think it's guts. And I will say I wouldn't say the support of the university. I'd say it's smaller than that there was issues. I would say that I'm just I thought if I don't do this, nobody else will. Like, I found papers from the 1950s of eye surgeons talking about trying to use this same tool as a diagnostic device for age-related blindness and other retinal conditions. The idea has been out there for a long time. The technology has only existed for 20 years, but the number of people who are doing this stuff is fairly small. So I don't see the medical device manufacturers lining up to take crazy risks on new techniques and new devices that don't exist in the market. They want to sell you a better car every year is what those companies want to do. So I kind of thought if I don't do this, nobody else will.
Hi. Great work. I understand you have a patent. What's the moat around this business? Like, is that a race to market, or you get it?
Yeah. Let's say the patent gets, someone works around it perfectly. The real moat is that in order to get the right signal for patients to be detected as AMD, it took me about 2.5 years of working with patients to find the right testing procedure to then show the difference between healthy and diseased. There's quite a lot of very sensitive optics that most of the optics manufacturers out there working in the
Connor,
medical
your
tech space
time
don't
has
have.
expired. Judges and guests, please help me in thanking Connor for his presentation.